Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to build our first GraphQL project together, and it's going to be a simple to-do application. If you haven't checked out already, then please check out my other video on basics of GraphQL. That's going to be useful before we start working on this project. And in this project I'm going to use Apollo GraphQL server, and I'm only going to concentrate on the server side for this video, and I'll make another video for the client side handling. So yeah, let's get started. Okay, so first let's create a folder for our project. Okay, so let's name it to do GraphQL, and we have to make this Node.js project, right? For that I'm going to give npm init, and I'm just pressing enter for all of these. Yes, and now we have a package.json. So now let's install all the dependencies for our project. I'm going to install two libraries. One is GraphQL, which is going to take care of core GraphQL parsing and execution algorithms, and the other is Apollo server, which is the main library that takes care of converting all our HTTP requests and responses into GraphQL operations. So let's install them. So this is Apollo server documentation, and if you are stuck at any point, you can go over this. They have like the best documentation, and for now we are going to copy these dependencies so that we can install them. So let's paste it here to install them. Now I'm going to open this project in VS Code editor. You can use any editor of your choice. I'm going to create a file called index.js, and in package.json I'm going to set up the type as modules in order to load my JavaScript files as ES module, and in scripts define the start as node index.js. And now the setup is over, so let's start. Now go to index.js and let's import our Apollo server. Okay, so there are two main things that your server side is going to have. One is Schema, okay, and the other is resolvers. Okay, and what is Schema? Schema is going to have the custom types. It's going to have special types like queries and mutations that the clients can execute. It is going to describe all the available data in your application and the type of the data. So to define the schema, I'm going to have a constant called typedefs, and so in our application we are going to have a type called to-do. And now I should think about what are the fields that this to-do type can have. If my client requests for to-do type, then what are the fields that they can expect? I have to write all of those fields here. Okay, so I'm going to have a field called title, and you have to define what is the type of this field, and title is going to be of type string. And I'll be having another field called description, which is going to be string again. What else can we have? We can have status, which is going to be of type string again. And now we are going to have a special type called query. Here you're going to list all the queries that the clients can request for. Now in my case, I'm going to have a query called to do, and if my client requests for this to do query, then I'm going to return an array of this type called to do. So I'll be returning an array of to do's, and since I have defined the schema, my client knows that if they query for to do, they're going to get an array of to do's which will contain all of these fields. So there's one more thing that I want to show you. If you have this GraphQL at the beginning, what happens is our IDEs can recognize that this is GraphQL code, and they'll also give a special highlighting for us, syntax highlighting. And for that I'm going to install an extension called GraphQL, and now if you see here, you have this special syntax highlighting, which will be helpful for us. So next step is to write resolvers, right? for every query or every mutation that your schema is going to contain, you'll be having a resolver. What happens is when the client queries for to-do, they know that they have to expect an array of to-dos which is of this format. Okay, this is just a format, that's it. But they need the data, right? Querying for to-do, then they expect data which is in the format of to-do that we define. And where do we get that data? We get it from database. Okay, but here for the simplicity of our application, we are not going to have any database communication. I'm going to create a dummy data set. Okay, so I'm going to create a file called to-do dataset, and I'm going to define a constant called to-do, and this is going to have an array which is of the same type that we defined here. Okay, so it's going to have title. The title is going to be, and it's going to be description, and the status of our task. And now let's write our resolver. So I'm going to define a constant called resolvers, and it's going to have the query type. Okay, so here you'll be writing a resolver for every query that you have. Okay, so I have a to-do query, and what happens is when my client requests for a to-do query, what I have to do is I have to return the data of this to-do, right? And the name of my data set is to-do, so I'm going to import that. So that's imported here. Okay, and I'll be returning this data set. Okay. So I'm returning this data set here when my client requests for to do, which is in this format. So we have written our first query, we have the schema and the resolver for that query. So usually what happens is, this is the place where you'll communicate with the database and retrieve the data. As you know, we have used our dummy data set at this time. Okay, now it's time to set up a GraphQL server and execute our first query. Now let's create an instance of Apollo server. Okay. And our Apollo server requires two parameters. One is the type diffs and the other is resolvers. Okay, and in order to run our server, I'm going to import standalone server from Apollo server. Okay, so what the standalone server does is it makes the work easier for us. It's going to create an Express application. It's going to register Apollo as a middleware, and it's going to prepare our application to handle all the incoming requests. So I'm going to get the URL out of it. I'm going to call this standalone server, and I'm going to pass the server, and I have to define the port it has to listen to. Port can be 4000. Okay, and let's have a console log to ensure that our server is running. Okay. Now let's run our project. Okay, sorry about that. Let's run our server again. Okay, so the server has started, and now if you go to this link, it will take you to a playground where we can test if our queries and resolvers works as expected. Okay, and yeah, let's try that. I'm going to click this. So this is the playground I was talking about. If you expand this, you'll see the types that are available, the special types. We have this query type, and under this we will get all the list of queries that our application has, and we have just a to-do query. And if you expand this to-do, you get all the fields that are available with this to-do query, and we have description, status and title. And let's write our first query. So you begin with something called query, and so the query that is available is to-do. once I press enter, it shows the available fields that I can request for. So I just want to request for the title, and I'm going to run this query. Yeah, we just had one data set, right? And it had a title as learn GraphQL, so I have this here. And so the client can request any field they want. Like if they want description, status and title, they can request for all of the fields, or they just want a particular field, they can request for that. It was not possible with REST APIs, right? But yeah, that is the speciality of GraphQL. And now I also want description, so I can run this and I also get the description. And if you see, there's a plus symbol here, right? If you click on that, it just adds that to the query. So yeah, once I clicked on that, I also get the in progress, the status. So we just ran our first query, and that's a good progress. So you can play with it. You can also name the query as it's optional, but you can name it. So if you have mutations, and that will also be listed under root types. And if you had more queries, that will be listed here. I hope you enjoyed this video. We built our first GraphQL project, and we understood the queries resolvers, and we also executed our first query. In the next video, I'm going to increase the complexity of the queries. We are going to see field level resolvers, and we are also going to look at mutations. So the upcoming videos are going to be more interesting. So please stay tuned to my channel, and let's meet again with another video. Bye.